Have you ever started doing something and known it was a terrible idea? That you would suffer tremendously if you went through with it, but decided to do it anyway? A viewer of my previous challenge video said that it was too easy. Perhaps they were right, or maybe I just got lucky. Either way, they issued me a new challenge. Grow a dino in Center River. Now, those of you who have played Evrima for a while, and who are familiar with the current update, are well aware of how many dinos lurk in Center River. It's an all-around horrible place to try and exist as a solo dino. Growing there is a terrible idea if you want to make it to adulthood. And so, like any sane, rational person, I decided to take on the challenge. I set myself some rules. And as dino is an all-around different kind of growing experience due to its length, they're a bit different from my previous challenge. 1. AFK growing is fine as long as I'm touching the water. 2. I can leave the river only for food, oxygen, or to escape larger dinos. 3. I cannot group up with other dinos to increase my survival odds. After setting some territory boundaries, which are basically just the natural area most people would consider to be the hub of Center River, I began my quest. Things started off okay. Got food, discovered that the skin I made was fairly invisible at night as long as I was fresh spawn, and spent some time attempting to find a hiding spot in my small range. Of course, it wasn't long before I had my first close encounter with a cannibal dino. Now, before anyone gets their toes in a tizzy, I am fine with being cannibalized as a dino. That's literally part of their gameplay and is both expected and encouraged by their diet. All it means is that I knew I had to be careful and be ready to flee at the first sign of danger. After making it through my first day as a center lurker, I returned to the one and only bush left in the water of my territory. Turns out, it wasn't a very great hiding spot. Started again. Quickly got my diets and tried to get back to sitting on the floor overnight in camouflage. Unfortunately, before I could hit the deck, I spotted another large dino headed my way. Nah. After a couple minutes had passed and I thought the coast was clear, I headed back to the water to catch a snack that was crossing. So anyway, I decided to move upriver and see if I could find a better place to hide that wasn't literally on the floor of the spawn zone. I was successful in finding a little divot in the wall off of a cliffside on the very edge of my range. It was completely submerged, so I had to watch my oxygen, but at least while I was small, I was nearly invisible there. The hidey hole, however, could only do so much. Oxygen and food were necessities no matter how badly I wanted to just hide and hope I survived without them. Oxygen especially quickly became a nuisance. I couldn't live without it, but surfacing meant exposure. Each death felt like a major setback. The first 30% of my growth was absolute torture, and once I was above 40%, I could no longer effectively flee those who wanted to eat me. Mildly frustrated and bored, I decided to mess with the small herd. An adult stego, 2 babies, and a fresh spawned tenno. A few other dinos were harassing them in the river, and since I'd messed up my diet, I decided to join in for a moment. Big mistake. Not so much because adult stegos are faster on land than fresh spawn dinos. More because while I was out there being a literal hero sneaking in from the back to be a menace, the other dinos were plotting my demise. As I returned to the water triumphant and ready to tell them about my successful mission, they simply finished me off. Okay, time to get serious. By now, I'm getting a bit frustrated. I've sat here in this river for way longer than I ever intended. No more deaths for me. I'm going to actually succeed at this challenge. My diet was a wreck, but I could eventually fix it if I was careful about what I ate. I had a plan. My hidey hole was really great for that first 30 to 40% of my growth. And as long as I was incredibly careful when I ventured out for food, it would all be fine. I was cautious, leaving the water for food more often than trying to get something by the water's edge. Getting an ambush in center is basically impossible anyway, since the majority of the player base are well aware of the dangers that lurk within. I had a few close calls. Just because I was determined to live, it didn't mean cannibals weren't determined to kill me. I was quickly learning that depending on the size difference, I could still occasionally flee. But if the one chasing me was determined enough, they would eventually catch up or chase me so far from water that we would both be doomed. In this case, just when I thought it was safe, I heard footsteps headed my way. Man was determined to take me down, and I'd already wasted a good chunk of my own stamina in my poor attempt to hide. Initially, I couldn't decide which side he was coming from. Had he swam over behind me? If I tried to get back into the river while he was coming up the hill, could I get there and vanish in one direction or the other before he could get back in? Unlikely. I could only go deeper into the trees and hope he couldn't spot me in the bushes. I used my entire stamina bar to run, knowing he'd likely catch my tracks, but hoping he'd turn back rather than try to chase me. Before long, though, I could hear him coming. I had to stay out of range. He'd been walking the entire time and had a near full bar of stamina. If I let him catch up, he'd run me down in an instant, and that would be it. Stamina gone and desperation setting in, I decided to take my chances in the river. If nothing else, maybe another dino would see him kill me and he'd also die. It was a vicious thought, but I'd been here once before already, and would at least have had a little bit of satisfaction knowing that he had to start over too. He must have guessed my plan. As I moved down the hill toward what I hoped was safety, he stopped his pursuit. I wasn't sure if he was regaining stamina for a last-ditch chase, or if I'd actually escaped. So I also stopped to regain what I could in preparation for what I expected would be my death. As soon as my bleed healed and I had a half bar of stamina, I made for the river. My direction was obvious, but I didn't care. He'd be miles behind by the time he reached the river. I made for my hidey hole, quite literally holding my breath the entire time. I slipped inside without a millisecond to spare. Not too much later, hunger drove me back out into the open once more. I didn't want to go far, but a fresh spawn gator didn't offer much for my massive dino's stomach. I would need more. Much more. On the far side of my territory, I smelled a pile of food. 2 dead dinos and a dead Cerrado. The only problem was the dino that had killed at least one, maybe both of the gators, was sitting on the pile. He was bloody, and I hoped fairly weak after the confrontation. Better to take him out than to risk him attacking me next. Lunging was my first mistake. My second mistake, however, was not realizing how incredibly fast the other gator vanished under the water. Initially, I chalked it up to a ping issue. The ping had, after all, gone up as I approached him. What I also didn't realize, though, was how fast he was now swimming when he came back at me to land another bite. Oh well. He'd fled. I won the fight. He's clearly too weak to continue, and I wasn't looking to put myself in any more danger by attempting to chase him down. I ate what I needed from the pile, then sat around and waited for a Cerrado to let its guard down enough to allow me to snatch it. I planned to take my meal back to my hidey hole, stash it nearby somewhere safe, perhaps on the cliff above me, so I'd have food to finish out its growth. I didn't get far before the other gator returned. Honestly, I had no idea where he'd come from, as I'd seen him sitting on the bank upriver from me, healing not long before, and I hadn't seen him coming toward me at all. I dropped my food and fought back. I was low on stamina, but doing my best to keep up as he zipped around attempting to finish me off. I landed several more bites, and he once again vanished up the river at a speed I should have realized was ridiculous for his size. Alright, if he was going to keep coming for me, this time I'd hit him first. I could see him sitting on the bank ahead of me again. He was basking, definitely not sniffing. He wouldn't see me coming. I dropped my carcass in preparation to attack, only for him to have vanished. What? Okay, fair enough, it's dark. I guess he could have swam away into the dark water ahead. I continued down the river. If this guy was going to keep coming back, I decided I'd best leave the water, possibly ditch the carcass so he couldn't sniff me out, and heal. And then it happened. Out of the water, at Mach 5, came the dino. Speed hacker. How did I not realize it was a speed hacker? Panic set in. I was so far into my growth, I couldn't die to a cheating son of a biscuit now. I dived back into the river and raced away, knowing it was probably useless, but with no other options. If I could just get far enough. If I could find another large dino. If I could find a way to save Flog, I could still save this growth. Screw the challenge rules at this point. If a cheater can ruin my challenge, then I'll cheat a little to save it if I have to. None of those things could be done, though. Between his speed and most likely the ESP he was using to target me, I could not run or hide. Just like the 2 gators he'd originally killed, my fate was sealed. That life, the one that should have made it all the way, was over now. And my frustration and hatred for both Center River and the dinos that reside there only grew. After my 8th death, I was just about ready to call it quits. My Discord members were telling me I should save my sanity and let it go. My friends were concerned. Even my husband told me it was time. I needed to call it. My stress levels were too high. I was too upset. My emotional health was on the verge of disaster, and everyone around me could see it. And so, with a few hours left in the day, I told everyone that this would be my last try. If I failed again, I failed. At least I'd be able to maintain some semblance of my sanity. I went in with a new plan. take no risks, log out as often as needed, and most importantly, stay near the hidey hole. Most all of those plans went out the door immediately. I decided I didn't care anymore. If I couldn't beat the challenge, I couldn't beat it. I managed to reach 40% easy enough by hiding in the hidey hole. Then I went looking for food and found some on the far edge by where the speed hacker was days earlier. I hung around there, eating as needed, until someone else came by and warned that a pair of cannibals were headed our way. Of course, he didn't mention from which direction they were coming. Nah. Last life, I wasn't gonna risk it. I climbed up the rock and hid awkwardly on the other side. The other guy didn't bother with hiding, and simply waited until they arrived. It didn't take long. I heard the attacks and watched as he fled up the hill. Then hoped the dino chasing him didn't notice me clinging like a salamander to the backside of the rock. He didn't. But the pair opted to outstay their welcome in hopes of catching the dino they'd chased off when he inevitably came back to water. As my water drained, I made a decision. Time to log out. No sane person would get back in the water when they could literally see a pair of known cannibals swimming in circles below. And waiting them out wasn't going to work if I didn't want to die of dehydration. When I logged back in a while later, the cannibals were gone, and I returned to my hidey hole, where I immediately felt less than safe for the second time. Thankfully, the darkness hid me from the gaze of the two dinos that decided to chill and chat outside, and they were ultimately chill as far as I could tell. My food situation was becoming dangerous once more, so I went on a foray into the night. I hoped that I could sneak on land while some raptors were hunting a nearby stego, and snatch some of the bounty. Unfortunately for me, the raptors weren't doing a very good job, and the stego decided chasing me was more important than fighting them. I spent the next several minutes trying to find a way to grab some food despite the stego. Another joined him, alongside several sentry galleys, and I thought maybe if I was sneaky I could grab something while the other gators were distracting them. It was a bad call. I found myself trapped in the bush, dangerously far from water, with two stegos there. No real way to get to the food, and nothing to do but log out before I simply wasted away because of the body campers. I gave it 10 minutes before logging back in. As the world came into view, things seemed fairly quiet. Perfect. Time to grab some food and get the heck out of Dodge. I hadn't given the server time to properly load everything around me, though. So you can imagine my surprise when, pop, stego. Pop, another stego! Come on, 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 come on. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Get in, 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 go, 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 go! I didn't scream. After healing up from that encounter, I went back on the hunt for food. It had been ages since I was properly full, and my big dino was struggling to stay fed when I didn't want to risk angering the hordes by eating someone else. I settled, momentarily, for a rotten carcass by the shallows. After a swim up to the end and back, I borrowed a smaller dino's kill. Figured he wouldn't object if it meant I spared him. I needed more though. Much more. So when I spotted a Serrato hiding in the bushes, I decided to take a chance on him being too oblivious to see my 6.5-ton massive bulk coming for him. His skin was too well camouflaged, and I didn't catch him. But someone just as oblivious happened by only a moment later. Turns out, they were together. A mixed Tenno-Cerrado-Carno pack. The smaller dinos chipped in, and we dropped their pack down to a solo Tenno easily. I ate my fill, which was both carcasses with room to spare, and moved on. As the morning sun broke over the river, I opened my character menu. 100%. Freaking finally! The victory I'd sought for 5 days across 9 lives. If I learned one thing from this challenge, it's that I could hate Center even more than I previously did. And also, that I will never, ever attempt to grow a dino there again. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and a comment on what challenges you'd like to see me do next. If you're new, make sure to subscribe for more content like this. Also, don't forget to check out my Discord server. Link is in the description. Thanks, and I hope to see you in the next one.